Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today for Regenerate for a Carbon Positive Australia. I'm absolutely thrilled to see so many people here, and thank you all so much for making this time in your, I'm sure, very busy diaries to come and join us. I want to begin by acknowledging that today we're broadcasting to you from Wajak Noongar Budja here in Western Australia, and to pay my respects to elders past, present, and of course emerging. And I think as well, acknowledging the huge amount of wisdom that the Indigenous communities bring, particularly to this subject matter and to the land that they have taken care of for millennia, to which we should be, extraordinarily grateful. I also want to pay my respects to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people who are in our audience today, and thank you so much for participating. So I'm not going to spend lots and lots of time talking at the beginning, because I know you're all here for the main event, which is to watch The Great Regenerating Australia by Damon Gameau. But I am going to introduce you very briefly to our team. Firstly, John, who's on the tech here, so he's making sure that everything's kind of working well. And if anyone has any problems with that, please reach out on the chat and we'll sort you out if we possibly can. To Maddie as well, who's helped organise this whole event. So thank you, Maddie. That's fantastic that you've managed to get us all here today. And then I wanted to ask for the rest of the team just to say hi when they come on after the film as well, but I'm going to introduce them to you here. So we've got Catherine Patterson, who's our head of partnerships, Lauren Purcell, who is our partnerships coordinator and communications head, and to Jess Fitzgerald, our commercial and carbon project coordinator. And they're all going to be helping to answer some questions and talk about the film alongside you all. Now, I want to say at any point, please feel free to share your opinions in the chat. We're going to be bringing those into the whole audience. And please share where you're from, because we'd love to hear and see where you've all come from today for this particular screening. So yeah, please put that into the chat. Let us know who you are and why you're here. So I'm really excited to be able to show you this film, because it's, I think, a film that really brings a sense of hope and possibility. And in these times, I think hope and possibility are what we're all looking for. We know things are tough out there, but there are some really innovative and really amazing contributions that are being made, particularly here in Australia. And I think what this film shows to us, which you'll kind of see as we move into it, is how those possibilities can be acted upon and how we can all regenerate for a better future for us all, really. So I'm going to not talk for much longer. I'm just going to let you get on with seeing the film. So please sit back and enjoy. If you need to put yourselves into speaker view at all to get a better view of the film, please do. And yes, let's move straight forward into watching what we've all come to see. Thank you, everybody. I actually found myself getting quite emotional when I watched that, because the beginning part of it, we've actually now started to see happen. And so when I watched that film, probably only 8-9 months ago now, or perhaps even less than that, some of the things at the beginning of that film hadn't happened. And so I just feel, it really gave me a real sense of hope and purpose. I would really love it if you've got any comments or questions inspired by the movie, or just general comments, that you put those into the chat. While we're doing that, though, because I think, it's like anything, isn't it? When you watch a movie, you kind of need that time to sort of settle and get that into your mind. I would say I'd like to just tell you a little bit about Carbon Positive Australia, because you may or may not know who we are. So Carbon Positive Australia is a West Australian charity. We've been around for 21 years now, and we plant across Western Australia, particularly in the wheat belt areas, and we plant as far north as just below sort of Kalbarri down to the Great Southern. We also have a specific koala project, which is in the northern New South Wales rivers area. Our planting, we measure how much carbon is sequestered from our planting in order to help people understand their carbon sequestration. But what we also do is plant for biodiversity, for habitat creation, and of course, regeneration. So I think one of the reasons that we wanted to show the movie was to just inspire people that, you know, regenerating Australia is actually really possible. And we know that because we do that every single day. We are also planning to get more involved in urban planting. So you will have seen, if you follow us, that we've been planting in schools something called pocket forests or Miyawaki method forests, which are small urban forests that help with heat impacts. We also plant and work with Indigenous people in order to plant in areas in partnership with them to, again, assist with climate change mitigation. And we do that through something which is called, and it's going to be launched very soon, called Plant Trees Australia. And Plant Trees Australia is your opportunity to actually take part in regeneration, because you can register as a helper on Plant Trees Australia. That will be going live in January. So we'll be telling you more about it. So please subscribe to our newsletter so that you can hear about it. You'll be actually able to take part in planting across this land. So I'm very excited about that. We also have a project to plant 1 million trees as well this coming year. So we're always looking for support to help us to do that. And finally, we are going to be planting in 2022 in Warralakin, which is near Westonia in the wheat belt. And we're planting there in an area that's very, very special. It has some very threatened species there and some really rare flora. And we'll be continuing our planting up at Uradi. We'll be planting more of these urban pocket forests. And so just keep a lookout for what we're doing. But now what I'd like to do is just hand over to a couple of members of the team if they've got any comments, and also just to pick up from some of the comments as well in the chat. So Catherine, I'll pass to you first, if you've got any comments.
Thank you, Louise, and thanks everyone for coming. Look, I've watched the movie before. I found it quite confronting, and whilst also being hopeful, as we know, we've got a lot of the solutions already here. It's just actually getting them rolled out and implemented, which we need to start doing quickly. But I just thought, I really love how he puts it across. He's a great storyteller.
Thank you, Catherine. So I'm just going to reading from Monique. Monia, she says, all this is possible. However, we are slowed down because of the intense pressure, lobbying and greenwashing of the powerful fossil fuel industry. And I don't think anyone would disagree with you on that, Monique. I think what I've seen in the work that we're doing is that there are many organisations who are genuinely wanting to push forward change. And I think we're beginning to see that, but you're absolutely right. We need to stop doing the things that we're doing too. So I'm just going to hand it over to Jess. If you've got any comments, Jess.
Yeah, thanks, Louise. I was the same. I for the first time a few months ago, and it is quite heartening to see the progress that we've made, particularly the scenes in the beginning. Voice to Parliament is in progress. We've increased our emissions reductions targets, and the climate bill has passed. So I felt more hopeful watching it this time than I did the first time, I would say.
Thanks, Jess. So from Naresh, this is amazing. Naresh from WRIA Energy, working on biofuel projects. Thanks, Naresh. Donna, inspiring. It seems so achievable. And I kind of agree with you, Donna. I think the way that Damon actually puts the film over, it really does make it so much more feeling of achievable, that we can actually do that. Just quickly going through the comments, just bear with me. Chris says inspirational, and Jason also inspiring and very well put together. I think again we'd all agree with that. So we were asked prior to today for any questions that you might want to have answered by the team here, and we've gathered together a few of those questions. And we'd love for you to obviously put some more questions in the chat too. So you feel free if you've got any questions that you'd like to ask. And we'll begin by, I'm just seeing one actually from Denny. Do you have any plans to expand what you're doing in other states other than the current project in New South Wales? So in terms of our sort of larger restoration projects, Denny, we are very, very keen to ensure that we plant with biodiversity and ecosystem restoration at the forefront of what we do. So in terms of that, we want to do where we've got some expertise, and that is obviously in Western Australia, and we've got some of that expertise in the northern New South Wales Rivers area. But with Plant Trees Australia, which is launching in January, that is all community-led projects that are being funded. So we are hoping that this will expand across Australia, and that whatever state that you're in, you can actually get involved in planting in your community and with planting with community groups across Australia. And yes, absolutely. There are other, I certainly know of the Rainforest Rescue guys who do lots of stuff in Queensland around the Daintree, and there's some of the Daintree groups as well. So please feel free to reach out to us, and we can put you in touch with any of those groups that you might want to get involved with in Queensland. So the first question that we had was, can you explain the difference between carbon, climate positive, neutral and negative? And this is a question that we get asked an awful lot. So I'm gonna answer it here because I think it's a good place. Lots of people here. So being carbon neutral is creating a balance between how much carbon you emit and how much is absorbed through carbon sinks. And if you absorb as much as you emit, so i.e. you balance your books a bit like a scale, then you're carbon neutral. However, this is a calculation that's done over a period of time, which is genuinely retrospective. So you're not carbon neutral for the future, you're always carbon neutral for the past, if that makes sense. We then have the term net zero. And net zero is about setting goals. So net zero is how you can achieve carbon neutrality and how you can set goals and work towards becoming net zero. So that's quite often why you'll hear large organisations and government bodies talk about becoming net zero, because they're generally trying to set goals for the future, because quite often they're not in a position to do it all at once. I mean, we're always wanting them to do as much as possible, but I think that's quite often why you see the net zero term used. Carbon positive and carbon negative are actually interchangeable terms. They both mean the same thing, and that they mean that over the lifetime of an individual or an organisation, that their carbon emissions are such that they've positively contributed towards carbon absorption rather than emissions. So they've done much better basically than just becoming carbon neutral, and are making a contribution towards the overall carbon, sink. So when we use the term carbon positive, though, we also include other things beyond just the carbon budget. So when we're talking about being carbon positive, we're also talking about increased biodiversity, increased habitat, making sure that we don't continue to lose species. I mean, we have a really bad record of losing species, and even our koalas now endangered. So when we're talking about being carbon positive, we're broadening that conversation beyond just carbon. So for the next question, I'm going to pass you over to Catherine.
Great. I haven't got my video on, but I hope that doesn't matter. From home. We had quite a few. We had quite a few questions about different farming techniques and land use methods, and what are the most effective sort of examples of natural sequencing farming, permaculture, regenerative agriculture, rotational cropping. What's sort of most effective in combating climate change? So unfortunately, I don't have the knowledge to really comment on these techniques individually. Just so you know, natural sequencing is a technique that manages water and nutrient movement on the landscape through structures and vegetation. And regenerative and permaculture are sort of a rehabilitative approach to farming, which involves less inputs, in particularly in the form of fertilizers and weed killers. Look, as I said, I can't really comment on these techniques individually, but to summarize, the landcare sector does provide huge opportunities, not only to reduce greenhouse gas emissions through using different techniques to feeds that reduce methane and reducing nitrogen fertilizers, but if we do regenerative techniques, it actually provides opportunities to sequester carbon and to deliver a whole lot of other environmental benefits. And this can be done through integrating native vegetation, improving soil health and the soil carbon, and sort of really thinking about how we can make the farming techniques more regenerative and not so linear at this point in time.
Great. Thank you so much, Catherine. I'm sorry we haven't got your video. It's a bit disappointing because I'm sure everyone would have loved to have seen you. So yeah, apologies for that. It's probably a bit of a tech thing at our end. So the next question is with Jess.
So we had a few questions coming about the carbon market and what part it has to play in the solution to climate change, and questions around the integrity of the carbon market. So I guess carrying on from what Catherine was saying, and the whole premise of the movie is that the carbon market isn't a silver bullet. What it does do, though, is put a price on carbon and increase accountability. I think it's important to note that it is relatively new and it's still developing. It provides an opportunity to invest in and develop projects that reduce and or remove carbon emissions. It also provides jobs in regeneration and lots of research opportunities. But something that we stress as an organisation is that reduction is really the first key to getting to carbon neutrality and to reaching net zero. There's currently, just in relation to the comments on the integrity of some of the methods, so that's been in the news recently, there's currently an independent review of the Australian carbon credit market underway, which is called the Chubb Review. Submissions are closed now, and the findings and recommendations will be released in December. The aim being to strengthen some of the methodologies that were in question, because if we're going to reach net zero, there really needs to be more trust in the market and more education and transparency, which is something that we certainly support as an organisation.
Thanks, Jess. So the next question that we had was that carbon and biodiversity goals don't always align, but they're both crucial to humanity and how we can tackle both. So absolutely right. At present, the carbon market itself, the ERF, the exchange, doesn't actually allow for biodiversity and Indigenous cultural values, for example. Some states like New South Wales and Queensland have started to introduce mechanisms whereby credits from carbon projects which provide biodiversity outcomes receive a price premium for that. We obviously as an organisation want to see every carbon project have biodiversity outcomes. So we think if you're regenerating land, that we should be doing that in the best way possible for that particular piece of land. Now, obviously, for some piece of land, that's going to be a different level that's required, but we definitely think that, it should be one of the top priorities. And so we're really pleased that the federal government is looking to announce the creation of a biodiversity credit scheme. I think our jury's still out as to, how successful that's going to be. and also in terms of some of the criteria of that. So we've already put in a submission to that paper to try and get it as robust as possible. And for us, a lot of the things that we're looking at is good baseline studies, good measurement, and ensuring that actually real biodiversity gains are being made. Because as I said earlier, the State of the Environment report really showed that we have to do something about that. So our next question was, I like this question. This was a really off the wall question. So, and it was sent in actually over a Facebook. I think this one came in through, and it was, do you think the worse the disaster, the better we become as humans? And how do ideas like donut economics assist? So it was it's kind of really out of our ballpark, I suppose, in a way, as an organisation, but we thought it was a really interesting question because, it kind of reminded me particularly of that idea of community that's in that film. Do we all get together better as a community? But I suppose this is a personal view. I would like to think we don't have to hit rock bottom before we start to actually do something. And we think that change is complex for all of us. Change, is really not necessarily that easy. So I really think that it's about learned behaviors. And so, yes, if we can start to do things in a different way and think about things in a different way and start to learn new behaviors, then maybe we will become better as people. But I have to say that I'm not a great believer in happy endings just because I don't think we're at the end yet. So I would like to give us a chance to kind of carry on at this point. So yeah, I think donut economics and some of the things that, offer us those opportunities to change are great. So thank you for that really off the wall question. It took us a little bit of time to actually get our heads around and think about how we're going to answer that one. The next question that we had was, how can we reduce our carbon footprint on a tight budget? And Lauren on our team is going to answer that one because this is something that it's very close to her heart. So thanks, Lauren. Over to you.
I personally love this question because often sustainable living does come at a cost to change things in our lives. And I always say that the choice to move to a sustainable option is in fact a privileged one. But I think the best thing to do is start with lowering your consumption. It's a really impactful way to make a difference. In our own homes, we can take simple steps such as looking to switch to LED light bulbs when we need to replace the ones we've currently got. They're up to 85% more efficient. If you do drive, consider walking, cycling, catching a bus or train. These are small things that will make a difference and save you money in the long term. And when it comes to money, another idea is to look at your bank and super funds. For example, are they investing in fossil fuels? Changing where your money lives is such an impactful action. I'd also say reviewing the climate policies of all the parties that you're looking into before you vote is really important. The Climate Council has great resources on their website, and also give an email to your local Member of Parliament to find out what action they're taking locally in your area. We have our carbon footprint calculator as well. It's a free tool, so you're able to look at what your impact is and then work on the ways that you can make reduction there. And lastly, I believe that one of the most important things we can do is to share our actions with others, because when we talk about making change, we can inspire others to get on board as well. Yeah, that's everything from me.
Thanks, Lauren. That's fantastic. So I'm just having a quick look. We've got some questions that have come in over the chat. And yeah, sorry, it's really hard to read and talk at the same time. I'm going to have a quick look and see if I can find. Okay, so from Glenn in Brisbane, the carbon market's problematic for agriculture as weather and climate more influences soil carbon than farmer soil management. Also, lots of charlatans in market currently misleading farmers. I mean, I can't really comment on that. I would just say that, I think it's like anything else. You really have to do your due diligence work and your actual understanding what a good project is kind of key to this. So part of that education piece is understanding what makes a good carbon project. And of course, one of the things that we're sort of coming up against, Glenn, in terms of planting is that, do we move towards climate ready species rather than planting species that are, in the areas now? And at the moment, our jury's still out on that because we don't have enough evidence. So what we're trying to do as an organisation is, we try and fund wherever possible research for these types of issues, to get funding for research, because, I think it can be very easy to move to one avenue, and actually, you want to do, in all of this, you don't want to do harm. I think it's probably where we sit. So, good research is I think crucial. So thank you for that question. I think it's a really valid one, particularly as the climate's having such a big influence on we're already in climate change. It's not something that's kind of going to happen. Next one from Tim. In the film, one of the suggested solutions was rewilding of urban places to encourage the return of wildlife. Do you have any examples? I don't. I think this is something that's certainly happening quite a bit in Europe already. I haven't seen any particular examples of it happening, within the Australian urban setting. But so I'd be actually really interested, like you, to try and find out if that is happening. What we are seeing is from councils and cities and shires a move towards looking at their urban greening policies, and we're hoping, we're hopeful that those will begin to change, that we'll see a lot more urban green cover. And obviously with things like the pocket forests that we're doing at the moment, as an organisation, we're trying to encourage everyone to, plant in their urban environments. We've sort of begun with schools, but there's lots of areas where community groups. Actually, I'll give a good example. So Brookton Community Group, they were a community garden and they had some old tennis courts that they hadn't been using. And so they've taken those up and actually put a mini pocket forest into their urban setting. So I think, there's so many possibilities within that urban setting to encourage activity and wildlife and greening into that. So thank you for that question. Sorry, is there any other questions that anyone else on the team has seen that they'd like to jump in on?
I was going to say, perhaps, Jess, there's one about, I read that airline calculate carbon emissions based on what they lose on the ground, but not air emissions. I felt Jess could probably answer this, and we do have some methodology on this on our website on how we've done the airline emissions.
Yeah, so it's a good question, and I don't know if I have the answer to it. Our calculator helps individuals and businesses calculate the emissions from the flights that you take as a passenger. When it comes to the airlines, I guess the only way that we would be able to find out is to look through their climate active certification and see what their scope is, so which emissions they're including in their boundary. That is publicly available. So if you go on the climate active website and then look for if it's Qantas or Virgin or the airline that you want to look at in particular, that is, I'm very intrigued by that, and I'm going to look into that too.
Thanks, Jess.
And the other one is from Jamie, is soil health and agricultural changes part of your scope?
So we aren't, as an organisation, involved in soil carbon. It's not an area that we've got any expertise in. So no, it's not part of the scope that we actually undertake as an organisation. Our organisation is primarily related to revegetation. So we're looking, and as I said it before, particular ecosystem restoration. But we know, there are although, as our other questioner said, there are maybe those who are less reputable, we also know there are some very reputable soil carbon projects that are actually trying to come up with some measurements. And I know that those are being supported, particularly here in Western Australia, they're being supported by the state government as well, to try and get better measurement and better baseline measuring for soil carbon projects. So I think it's certainly an interesting area. Unfortunately for us, it's not an area we know a huge lot about, because we mostly concentrate on revegetation work. So I'd love to move over now and let Catherine speak to you for a few minutes. She's going to be talking to you now about what you can do to start your own personal regen journey. And thank you all so much for your questions. Please, if you've got any more, feel free to message us, and we'll happily share those on our social platforms.
Thanks, Louise. So we made a few dot points on how everyone can get started. Lauren mentioned some of them. First and foremost, reduce consumption where you can. This does not just have to apply to physical goods. It also means reducing travel, electricity and water consumption where you can. We have some great tips on our website. We have a booklet called Earth Friendly Habits, and it really sets out what you can do. And also, doing your own carbon calculator will really help in this process, because it shows you what's driving your own personal carbon footprint, so you can see where you can make the most effective changes, rather than, I guess, sort of implementing things here and there and not really knowing what they're doing. The other thing, as Lauren said as well, is to get involved, learn, vote, join community projects and movements, and communicate with people around you. It's really, really important. Get local, buy local, and as I said before, get involved in any local and community projects that you can. We'd also like to encourage you to plant a tree with us if you felt this recording was worthwhile. As we've said, the plantings that we do help restore highly degraded land that's been previously cleared in agricultural areas. We tend, as an organisation, to work on areas that don't always have high carbon outputs, but they have high ecological restoration values, because we feel that's paramount and really, really important to get our environment on track. I also just wanted to say, if you are looking for more help and advice, education is part of our remit, and there is a plethora of resources up on the website to help you start your regenerative journey and look how you can take action on your own ecological footprint today. That's me done with.
Thanks, Catherine. So I just, I would want to encourage everyone to, take those next steps and think about your own carbon footprint. I know that for a lot of us, we know that the big emissions out there are by the larger organizations and by, particularly in the oil and gas sector, for example. But I just, I always say to people that, and because I use it as my own mantra, and you can, take it or leave it, but is that as an individual, you do have far more power than you think you have. And I think the Damon Gameau film really shows that the power of us acting together is absolutely huge. We have the power to choose where we spend our money or not to spend our money as well, is a very powerful choice, particularly around consumption. There was a comment, should we fly for fun? Maybe we have to think about things like, what we decide as individuals is our priority in terms of our carbon reduction. And maybe for some people that will be, no longer flying for fun. So I think it's, we all have our personal journeys and we all have our personal ability to take power. We have a podcast where you can hear lots of different opinions on this, from sustainable travel to sustainable hairdressing to, to any real subject around this whole sort of sustainability and regenerative area. So I would really encourage you to kind of find your area that is yours and your passion, and listen and learn more through not just the resources we give, but all the many resources that are out there to help you begin your journey. So I want to finish by just saying a huge thank you. Thank you for showing up. This feels like a very really positive action actually to take, to show up to watch a film like this. So thank you so much for doing that. I would really encourage you to subscribe to our newsletters, follow us on social, because we interact with lots and lots of different groups, and we have lots of different partnerships. So by doing that, you'll be able to see a broad range of subjects that will be of interest to you and your regenerative journey. And I can tell just from the comments that have come up in the chat that, you know, your knowledge base and your interests are hugely wide, even just as an audience here, you know, from soil carbon project through vegetation, sustainability topics. So, you know, I can see here that there is a real breadth of knowledge here in the room as well. So thank you all so much. This will be recorded. You won't be able to see the film again, I'm afraid, because we're only allowed to show that once, but you will be able to see the comments, and we'll keep a transcript of the chat as well so that you can actually have a look at that. Please put any final comments in the chat now. Otherwise, thank you all so much for your contribution today. And without you, we wouldn't have an event. So thank you.